Hi everyone, these are anatomy and physiology videos for healthcare students. In this video, we're going to talk about endocrine system, specifically hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus is often considered the controller for the endocrine system. It is part of the diencephalon and it creates hormones that control production by the anterior pituitary, and it also makes hormones that are released by the posterior pituitary. So the hypothalamus has a pretty tight relationship with the anterior. There is a portal system, it's a blood vessel network called the hypothalamic-hypophyseal portal system that connects hypothalamus to anterior pituitary. So the anterior pituitary is considered a endocrine gland. It's made of glandular tissue. It releases its own hormones. Now, the posterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by way of axons that travel from neurons situated in the hypothalamus down into the posterior pituitary. And upon nerve stimulation, the posterior pituitary releases its stored hormones. So technically, the posterior doesn't make any hormones of its own. It is just storing and releasing hormones for the hypothalamus. So two portions here. Pituitary has an anterior portion called adenohypophysis, and the posterior portion is neurohypophysis. And just to repeat, the anterior portion is endocrine tissue, it's glandular tissue that's going to release its own hormones, and the posterior portion is nervous tissue. That posterior portion does not release its own hormones. Rather, the hormones are stored in the posterior for the hypothalamus. So let's talk about a way to make this easy to remember. The hypothalamus makes and releases releasing hormones. Those hormones specifically tell the anterior pituitary to make its own hormones. Now, there are inhibiting hormones. We're not going to really focus on those right now, but those inhibiting hormones will decrease production by the anterior pituitary. So it's kind of like a gas pedal for the releasing hormones and a brake pedal using those inhibiting hormones. Now, the hypothalamus makes the hormones released by the posterior pituitary. If you see the word releasing, you're probably looking at a hypothalamic hormone. Let's look at the anterior pituitary. There, you're going to see stimulating hormones and tropic hormones, SH or TH. Tropic hormones stimulate glands or organs of the body, such as thyroid, adrenals, mammary glands, and gonads. And then, of course, posterior doesn't make its own hormones. It is only storing hormones for the hypothalamus. It releases them under neural stimulation. Let's walk through a couple of examples. So this is a pass the buck system. The hypothalamus makes releasing hormones like thyroid or thyrotropic releasing hormone. TRH tells the anterior pituitary to increase production and secretion of thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH. Hey, use that helpful prefix. Thyroid is where we're headed. So we're going to head to the thyroid gland with TSH. We'll tell the thyroid follicles to make and release thyroxine and triiodothyronine. Those are T4 and T3. Here's another example of how this works. It's kind of like a relay system. So the hypothalamus makes gonadotropic releasing hormone, GnRH. In turn, that travels over a blood vessel portal system to the anterior pituitary. It in turn releases hormones like follicle stimulating or even luteinizing hormone. If you're using follicle stimulating, it then travels to the gonads. Those are male testes and female ovaries, and there, sex cells are prepared for development. All right, and here's one last example using growth hormone, releasing hormone. Like I mentioned, there are inhibiting hormones, but my examples here just include the releasing version. So GHRH targets the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary makes and releases growth hormone, which in turn tells your body cells to grow. That happens often during interphase, or it may tell cells to go and undergo reproduction, like mitosis. So here's a list of all the hormones created and released by the anterior pituitary. So we've got 6. There are others. We're just covering these 6. We'll start with growth hormone, which promotes the growth of cells and tissues. It makes those cells grow during interphase. It also promotes mitosis. We're going to see the effects of growth hormone in places like muscles and bones and the liver. Follicle stimulating hormone targets the gonads. It causes sex cells to be produced, so oocytes or ova in females, and sperm or spermatozoa in male testes. Luteinizing hormone is another one that targets the gonads. This one increases hormone production, such as estrogens by female ovaries and testosterone by male testes. Use all the helpful clues you can get. Prolactin means for milk production. This one maintains milk production in female breast tissue and mammary glands in a mom who is breastfeeding a baby. Again, use all your clues. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. Adreno means adrenal gland. Cortico is the cortex of that adrenal gland. So this is the adrenal cortex that we're targeting. Tropic hormones are anterior pituitary hormones that target other glands or tissues of the body. Here's case in point. ACTH targets the adrenal cortex, telling it to make and release its hormones. Now the last one, thyroid stimulating hormone. Stimulating hormones come from the anterior pituitary. This tells us where we're going. We're going to tell the thyroid gland to make and release its thyroid hormones. Now, the posterior pituitary is a different type of tissue. It's nervous tissue, and it is storing 2 hormones for the hypothalamus until they are released through neural stimulation. So we've got 2, oxytocin and ADH. Oxytocin promotes uterine contractions in a mom who is giving birth to her baby. It also promotes a milk letdown reflex. So if you've ever been in the grocery store as a mom, you got your infant with you, somebody else's baby begins to cry, you may lactate simply because of the neural stimulation that causes oxytocin to promote that milk letdown reflex. Now, antidiuretic hormone is against diuresis. Diuresis is urine formation. So if you're against urine formation, you are in favor of retaining water. So this particular hormone promotes water retention by the kidney. If you retain water, you're going to increase blood pressure. This one also reduces dehydration. Interesting little tidbit about this one. Alcohol inhibits ADH, so that's why we urinate frequently when we're drinking alcohol. It promotes dehydration, and it also causes us to lose those fluids as urine. All right, so to summarize, some of these endocrine glands listed here are in fact controlled by the anterior pituitary. We have the thyroid in the neck. Thyroid produces thyroxine and triiodothyronine. Those are released in response to TSH. We also have the adrenals, specifically the cortex, ovaries, and testes. All right, so there are 6 hormones that we just discussed being released by the anterior pituitary. So can you remember what they are? All right, growth hormone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, prolactin, ACTH. That's a lot easier than saying adrenocorticotropic hormone. and then TSH, also easier than saying thyroid stimulating hormone. Keep in mind that posterior pituitary doesn't make its own hormones, it only releases them for the hypothalamus. There's two that we discussed, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. So let's take a moment to review. Where is the thyroid gland and where is the pair of adrenal glands? All right, there's the thyroid. That one's often confused with thymus, but thyroid is in the neck, right below the larynx or voice box, and adrenals, they sit on top of the kidneys. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments for me. If you enjoyed the video, please follow my channel.